All right, there we go.
Got it. Okay, well, thanks, Cassie, for having me. I believe I spoke to Julia Barton a few months ago to get this on the calendar, and it took, this long for me to find an open slot based on when your cadence for these meetings. So I'm happy to finally be able to speak to this group and share about Practical Farmers of Iowa. We're a Big Tent organization. We are headquartered in Ames. And primarily service Iowa, but a lot of the upper Midwest anymore, as we've kind of reached our tendrils, as we call it, into neighboring states. We have over 6,400 members these days. And these members, these farmers, they're primarily farmers, represent a diverse mix of enterprises and farm sizes. So no-till grain, organic crops, conventional crops, cattle ranches, market vegetables, orchards, more. If you can raise it or grow it in Iowa, there's probably a member representing that enterprise or that practice in our group. And what unites these folks, these people, is a shared vision of resilient farms, vibrant communities, clean water, and healthy soils. And as I look at, your group, Ohio Ecological Food and Farm Association, I see a lot of similarities and overlaps. OIFA cultivates a future in which sustainable and organic farmers thrive, local food nourishes our communities, and agricultural practices protect and enhance our environment. Sounds very similar to PFI's vision of resilient farms, vibrant communities, clean water, and healthy soils. A lot of similar terms there in terms of communities, farms, environment. Both our groups specialize in helping farmers learn from one another. We often refer to this as farmer-led investigation and information sharing. And that investigation is a lot of where I come in and our Cooperators program comes in. So investigation through farmer-led on-farm research. That's my specific role at Practical Farmers, is to lead our Cooperators program. And we see that as a community, there's that word again, of curious and creative farmers taking a scientific approach to improving their farms. What that often looks like is, in terms of putting farms to the test, is this kind of classic cartoon of a strip trial. So if I were a row crop farmer, this would be the kind of design or experiment that I would come from for putting my farm to the test, as I have it put here. It's a paired strip trial, nothing fancy, nothing that we invented or came up with. It is a very simple tool that a farmer can use for comparing practices in terms of the returns to investment, the costs, the yields, whatever the kind of metric that is of interest. How are practices benefiting me or my farm? Is a particular practice right for me or my farm? We found that this tool, this setup is a very simple yet robust way of starting to answer those kinds of questions on farms. How this sometimes looks then, not as a cartoon, but maybe in strips on a farm, might look like this. So this was a long-term cover crop project that Practical Farmers and some partners ran for about 10 years. And cover crops have been a very high point of interest for many of our farmers for the last 10, 12 years. I think over 60% of our trials have been somewhat cover crop focused over the last decade. But this really spurred from a question of when cover crops were becoming of more interest, but people were interested in, okay, the environmental benefits sound great, those seem obvious to us, but how would they affect my crops, my corn or soybean crops? This was a very simple yet effective and robust way of testing that, to find that farmers can raise cover crops and really good corn and soybean crops without losing yield, maybe even improving yield in some instances. That often projects, easy, simple projects like that, A versus B, yes versus no, can start transitioning into more complicated or can evolve into other kinds of questions. So now I want to use cover crops on my farm. How can I better or more effectively manage those cover crops? So can I let them grow a little longer? Should I not let them grow a little longer? Can I get more weed suppression out of them? Can I get other kind of benefits from the cover crops? So terminating them or seeding them at different dates became questions, and that could still be put to the test with that kind of simple strip trial model. And what comes out of these kinds of projects, right? We have those simple questions of how's it going to affect my costs or my yields. We sometimes have some neat aha moments that we weren't really thinking about. Here's a picture of a soybean field where the farmer planted into a dense, thick stand of cover crop. Really wasn't sure how well that was going to go, but then by July, August, how clean that field was, and not having to, this was a conventional farmer, have to spray it again. Wow, we weren't going into it thinking that that's what we were going to do, but then when we factored in those reduced costs at the end, as well as the no difference in yields to where he planted into a small cover crop. Wow, that helped us understand, geez, cover crops can help maybe pay back or eliminate other costs. We can spend money on cover crops, but maybe not spend money elsewhere. And that's a huge, huge win economically, financially, that we weren't initially thinking, we might see. And so a farmer like Sam, who was one of the participants in a project like that, right? He told us, I can build confidence in using my cover crops, using less reliance on chemical herbicides and other inputs. So that was a huge win, another win of on-farm research, seeing and believing for oneself. Other types of questions that our farmers have been asking and learning about, particularly when it comes to soil health practices, cover crops, or extended rotations, are that going beyond just corn and soybeans, we are in Iowa, can have some benefits. So we're using cover crops that cost money, and we might not always get those weed control benefits, but if we do have cattle or sheep and we pay attention to our costs and our records, we might see that, wow, cover crops helps pay back in terms of no less costs for feeding hay or other livestock feed, because we've got that awesome forage out there that they're feeding on and gaining weight or maintaining weight. Likewise, farmers have been interested in diversifying their crop rotations and wanting to use other cover crops, not just cereal rye or winter wheat. Maybe in Ohio, there's a little bit more of diversified rotations with wheat. In Iowa, not so much, but farmers here are helping to learn more about or relearn more about diversified rotations where you can use cover crops like clover or alfalfa, sun hemp, cowpeas, other peas to improve the fertility of the soil, because those are planted in the spring or summer and fit in really well with a small grain crop. So, right, farmers like Dick Sloan here in Eastern Iowa, who's been working with extending his rotation, growing maybe his cover crop seed or growing wheat seed for feed or rye seed for feed, has been learning how the real effectiveness of cover crops like red clover can improve his soil health, reduce his fertility for his coming corn crop. So another really good win and success story for intentional observation and putting a farm to the test with these kinds of practices that people are curious about or read about or hear about from experts or other farmers from elsewhere in the country or continent. But we are a big tent, and we don't just work with row crop farmers or conventional row crop farmers. We work with all kinds of farmers, not just in education and outreach, but also on farm research. We have a fair number of horticulture and vegetable producers, horticultural farmers, vegetable producers, that also want to put their farms or their practices to the test. So on-farm research is not just for soil health practices. It is for trialing other cost impacting practices on the farm. Might be different varieties that come with different price points, or customer preferences that these growers want to test and learn more about for themselves and for their potential markets. Whatever it may be for whatever farm really fits into, to some degree, on-farm research. And that also means, right, we do cover crops with vegetable farmers too, right? Because we have people who are soil health focused, want to either reduce weeds or improve their soil fertility. So someone like Kate Edwards here was curious how to compare hairy vetch or cereal rye ahead of her winter squash, and found that the squash performed better ahead of after the vetch, and presumably because of the added fertility that conveyed. It really is, and I've repeated this a few times, about what the farmer is keen to learn about and what is most important to them. Sometimes it's a weed, sometimes it's pest pressure, sometimes it's cost, sometimes it's yield. It's really about can I, what about? And our program really relies on curiosity and creativity. That's really what unites these trials kind of in general, because it doesn't always matter what the question is or what they're trying to learn about. It's that they want to learn about something or are curious about something and want to use science to inform the decisions, and use that kind of simple model, that simple approach, that simple tool of a paired strip trial or a paired plot trial or paired bed trial if it was a vegetable farmer. By conducting their own rigorous scientific research to answer their questions, right? They are, our group, at least in my experience, have no shortage of questions that they want answered or want to pose. There's certainly more than I could ever come up as a researcher that they generate, so that makes it a lot of fun. And what I've also observed too is that our approach, our program, and the kind of community around it relies on and kind of creates the power of observation. Relies heavily on observation by the farmers participating. And one of the things I've observed, because I'm observing them observing things over the past few years, is that the on-farm research really is a tool that helps them kind of train their eye and look for other things on their farm, or pay attention to other things on their farms. Maybe not always just in the trial itself, but they seem to be, from what they tell us, developing these skills, these practices, these behaviors on their farms for paying attention to things. And then asking questions about, well, geez, I wasn't trialing basil, but now I've got questions about basil because I was doing something in my tomato plot for a trial, and my eyes are now tuned to think about, should look at these things, and my brain is tuned to kind of think about these things, right? So people like Emily Fagan, a fruit and vegetable grower up in Northeast Iowa, will tell us things that, like, just doing a trial helps me learn and helps me ask better questions about my farm to improve our farm. And so, right, we've got these individuals doing these things and learning about their farms and building skills. On the end side of those things, after farmers can conduct their trials and their research, and they learn what happened and what they want to do next, a big part of the program is to get them together and transmit this learning. So farmer to farmer sharing, farmer to farmer knowledge exchange. That's a major role that we play, that my coworkers and I play in the program, to provide ample opportunities for that networking and learning. I said it at the top, right? Both of our organizations are really focused on sharing, learning, network. And so we do that in a variety of ways, be it meetings, conferences. We host a huge annual conference every January. I think you all do every February, from what I've learned. These photos are from our annual research meeting, our Cooperators meeting held in every December. where we gathered a group of people who have participated in the program or would like to participate in the program. Usually it's a 2-day affair. First day is those who did research sharing about what they did, right? So those kind of bottom 2 photos look even, a hand-drawn, here's my plot map, here's what I did, showing some basic graphs, here's what I learned, here's what I found from the 2 practices, and then creating little discussion groups, a lot of Q&A, a lot of back and forth. And then this is a springboard for the next year in terms of, okay, here's what we learned last year, and here's what I saw on my farm last year, here's what we want to do next. And here's where the ideation for the next year of work begins. I go into this meeting every December not knowing what my next year is going to look like, which can be extremely nerve-wracking for running a program like this. But every time I come out, and it reliably so, with a flurry of ideas and things that we're going to design experiments around and generate some interest in from this group. So it's an incredible experience. It's nerve-wracking, it's thrilling, but it's awesome to watch this group of such committed and curious and excited people learn from one another and ideate together. It's really fulfilling, it's really rewarding, and they all see it as a reward for their work. It's a celebration of all the work, and it's a really awesome thing to be a part of. We also host field days every summer around the state and now around the Midwest for our researchers or other members to showcase these practices that we're learning about and wanting to share about. So sometimes that would be a cooperator to show their trial to others, show what they're seeing. Might be in the middle of the trial. We still don't know what the results are going to be. But we invite people to come out. Let's go take a look and start asking questions and see if a bunch of people can make observations or takeaways from it. We also do publish results in research reports that we publish on our website, and we make these accessible to download and view free of charge. And we present the results using farmer voices, while also adhering to some standards of scientific reporting, right? So background, methods, results, conclusion sections, but it's written with a farmer voice, with more and so that it's approachable, and including the observations and the feedback and the so what and what's next from the farmers involved, because they were the doers. They're the ones making this happen and learning about what happened and what they're going to do next with the practice. I can have a take home that might be totally different from them, and theirs is really what matters because it's what they're going to do next or not do next. That is really important. These, like I said, these are hosted on our website, and they're free to download and view. We also tell our farmers stories in our quarterly magazine, and sometimes we use this magazine as a opportunity to discuss or share about on-farm research in more of kind of a lay fashion, right? More of a general audience kind of fashion. So that's another way that we get the word out about not just research, but all the doings and happenings of practical farmers and the interests and the events that are going on within our membership. One of our other outreach forums that we've kind of started to grow over the last 5 years is our YouTube channel. Some videos are specifically focused on on-farm research trials. Others are just kind of tangentially related. They're practices or issues that are very closely related with the research that are being done. We've produced a few short videos to help tell some of our farmer stories, with them being showcased and interviewed on camera. These are available on YouTube along with many other shorter videos and recorded conference sessions that we've produced over the last few years. And I just wanted to kind of end up by giving kind of just a quick take on last year in specific. So here's a look at what all went down last year in our Cooperators program in terms of where trials occurred across the state of Iowa and one up in southeast Minnesota, how many people we had involved, how many farms, and how many trials got executed, you'll notice that there are more trials than there are farmers, and that's because sometimes people do 2 or 3 because they're super cooperators or super engaged and want to ask a few different questions. Other times, just one trial per farm. Again, we have kind of a range of experience or comfortability with all that kind of complication or added work to the farm that a trial brings with it, because this is additional work to, you know, just the typical day-to-day farming that our farmers are doing. So it is extra work, and it can be a commitment. And here is a snapshot of our funding sources. This is by no means comprehensive, but we do piece together our funding from several sources, be it state, federal, or foundation, to both pay for staff time, but to pay cooperators for their time and effort as well. We always offer a stipend or participation fee for completing a trial. We think that is really important for rewarding that work or some kind of token of appreciation. What we offer is probably not fully in line with the amount of time and effort put forward if we billed for the hours or time that a farmer put on this at a decent wage. But we still feel strongly that we need to find something to give back for all the work that they put in. So again, this is by no means comprehensive, but this is a lot of the different funders that we have worked with and still work with to make it all happen. Again, pay for the staff time, pay for the promotions and publications, and for the farmers involved. And I just wanted to break down a little bit about what we learned last year from the program, from those who participated. It typically is the more experienced farmers getting involved. It's really it's high-level participation in terms of kind of the things that people can do with practical farmers. It's more than just going to an event or watching a webinar, which of course those are valuable participation opportunities that we offer. But this program generally attracts more experienced farmers who are looking to do a little more. Now, again, we have some beginning or mid-career farmers as well, but it's predominantly those with 11 or more years of farming experience, based on what they tell us. When we ask them why they're getting involved in the program, why they're conducting on-farm research, we ask them these kind of 6 different motivations to rank these. And improving their own production practices bubbled to the top in this last year. Not far behind was improving or evaluating financial viability and personal learning, but improving production practices, really seeing stuff for themselves, was why they wanted to get involved with whatever the practice was: roll crimping, cover cropping, basil varieties, stuff like that. That's what they wanted to learn about. At the end, when we asked them, okay, how did things go after their trial was completed, they saw the results, had a little back and forth with me or another staff scientist. They told us that they were quite satisfied with how the trial was designed to answer the question that they started with, and that just over 3/4 of them said, I got a really large change in knowledge from doing this. So we see that as a good win, and that feedback tells us that, I was saying it earlier, that a trial, doing and designing and conducting a trial, vital tool for learning, right? That kind of backs up that claim that we were kind of thinking about and we were hearing about. That's what they're telling us. We get also feedback like this from John, who finally bought a roller crimper and started playing with it with trials, and boy, did it ever get his creative juices flowing, and just all the questions just started bubbling up. So that helped us learn that doing a trial really does help spur new ideas, and people make other observations on the farm, not just directly tied to the trial at hand. That tells us that conducting a trial really sparks curiosity, hones the power of observations, that kind of skill building, and almost like professional development. You might be able to consider that by doing these things, by doing on-farm trials. There's also maybe some learning of scientific literacy, being able to evaluate other research that we get exposed to by extension agents or university researchers or other researchers, helps us kind of evaluate or take that in better. And that's what people have told us who have come through this program. When it comes to making changes on the farm based on what they did, over half tell us that based on our project, we're probably going to make a change based on what we learned, based on what we saw. We sometimes though get an answer like this, like from Daniel, who evaluated flame weeding his soybeans, that geez, if I were to do this on a larger scale, I'd need a larger flame weeder, or timing would really have to align with all the other things I have going on. So sometimes people are not likely to make a change. So just about a quarter of people tell us, I don't think so. And we actually consider that a win too, because you can look at trials as just building confidence and aiding decision making. Either way, yes, I'm going to try this new practice, or you know what, I'm going to confidently reject that because that just didn't work for me, or I need to try that again. And that's a win too, right? Maybe it cost me too much. Maybe it took me too much time. Maybe I just didn't enjoy doing it. That's a good learning outcome. And so not changing sometimes seems like, oh, maybe not a win, but that's actually can be considered a win, in my opinion. Competent decision making for adopting or rejecting a practice. And then we get these kinds of responses, and that's the kind of overarching theme, is that we're not trying to give instructions or prescriptions other than you should probably try it out and look and see it for yourself, like what Fred is saying here, because it might work one way on my farm, but maybe not on your farm, or with the equipment you have, or the size of fields you have, or the climate or soils that you have. You should really try it, because it's the only way for you to learn if this thing, this practice, this issue, this strategy is for me. And I'll give Shay and Anna the final word here, because I think it really expresses the major take home of building confidence, making feel braver about scaling up if it makes sense, doing so with clear insight about production practices. And they told us, trials help build the case for practices to be financially viable for us, and hopefully other farmers too, right? If they want to take the jump and see it and do it for themselves. So that's PFI's Cooperators program, and I look forward to any questions you all have for me, or what kind of discussion points we'd like to get into.
Stefan, I'll start out with a question. I'm interested how you support these farmers, if there's like some framework in terms of helping them present the results or designing the experiments and trials. What does PFI do in this equation without overstepping their bounds?
Yeah, great question.
Can I tag into that same question?
Please.
Which is just what it looks like, what your communication with these farmers looks like over the course of the season too.
Great.
If you could just walk through, I guess, from beginning to end, kind of like, what's your support role?
Sure. So I mentioned that December Cooperators meeting, the research meeting. So that's middle of December. And when we come back from the New Year holiday, we start retouching base. So generally January through March, maybe into early April, which we'd not want to wait, because that gets to become planting season, right? It becomes when no farmer is available, and rightly so. We start retouching base with those farmers through Zoom calls, email threads, telephone calls, we've moved to Zoom calls to trying to get like, those 3 or 4 who kind of expressed interest in a project. All right, let's nail down your idea and a simple design for this project that each of you can work on together and execute based on your timelines, your farming operations. So we then are scheduling those and holding those for the first quarter of the year. January through March is a lot of our work of refining and the details of the question of the project and landing on, okay, here's what you all are going to do, and we kind of spell this out in an agreement document, and here's what PFI is going to do. You're gonna here's your question, here's your objective. Here are the treatments that you are each going to put in with a little description, and then a cartoon of the plot design for them to follow, a randomized replicated plot design. You're going to do you're going to plant in May and take these measurements or these readings. You're going to report those to PFI on as is basis. And PFI will be in touch with you through the season, through the year, in a certain rhythm, based on your preference, right? We ask them, do you prefer text, email, call? We've been setting up shared online spreadsheets where they can go in and just add, when did you plant? When did you cultivate? When did you transplant? When did you seed? When did you, take observations? When did you fertilize? Did you apply mulch? When did you spray? When did you harvest? All those kinds of things. We set those up as early as we can so they can see, here's all the things we're gonna ask you about in order to compile a report at the end. And we'll be in touch with you through the year when we think these are happening, so that you don't forget, oh yeah, that was June 1st, or it was some first week of June. Okay, we'll make a best guess it was June 2nd or 3rd and mark that down. But we are in touch with them quite frequently through the year to check in on, how's the progress coming? How's our things looking? Hey, can you share some photos? That we'd love to include photos of your trial in the report. It'd be great if you can be included in that too. Although, if you're farming by yourself, it's kind of hard to take a selfie while driving a tractor, or while you're just looking at a pepper plant. So yeah, a lot of on our end trying to understand, okay, what is happening when, and when can I remind them, be in touch with them, and let them know too, like, hey, I'm going to be in touch. I'm not just cutting you loose. We'll be in touch. I'll call or text or email every now and then and remind you or ask you, hey, when, how's that looking? When did you do that? Hey, it's getting to be near time of this. Are you ready to do that? Do you have any other questions for me? Oftentimes things will happen in the field or in the farm, and they'll, call us and let us know, hey, I have to make a little bit of a change. Is that okay? And we sometimes have to troubleshoot those. Maybe one of the treatments fell through, and so, okay, now it's just a 2 treatment trial, not a 3 treatment. Fine, that's okay. Like, this stuff happens. We want to know about those things sooner rather than later, because we might be starting to, draft a report, during the summertime, because we think, oh, everything's going along. These are all the things they're doing, and we can write all this, we can write the methods in the background now, because those have happened. We don't have to all just wait till October and November to write everything up. But it'd be good to know, if changes have been made, because we want to report an accurate story in our reports for others to read. We know that our membership values our research reports as one of the top learning tools that we produce. It's right up there with field days. So we know that those are important, and we want to make sure those are of high quality. I'll stop sharing my screen now, because I think we're just in the conversation mode. Let's see, and then, it's at the end of the year, we are asking for them for their results, for their, whatever the metric is, if it's number of fruit, weight of grain from the strips, And then we are responsible for running the very basic statistical models on our end to, see if treatment B did better than treatment A or not. And then, if we also collected costs or price received, we can run a quick economic analysis too to show, hey, no yield difference, but treatment B cost you way less, so the return is better. So, that's something to think about. And then we administer a end of the trial survey or reflection, and that's where I grabbed a lot of those results. Okay, so what'd you learn? Was this useful? What came out of this? What could be improved? What did you not think was going to happen that happened? Right, those kinds of, we start entering that conversation after we analyze and interpret the results for them. We really want to know what's the ultimate so what is what it means to them, what they're going to do with it, what it means to them. And then we often portray that in the reports that, right, like, hey, Jack is now going to do this, or he's going to evaluate it one more year because he's not sure. Maybe it was really dry conditions, so I'd like to see it again under more normal precipitation, right? I mean, those are basic general outcomes that I'm just kind of pulling from 10 years of experience that we sometimes get after working through this nose to tail with these people. And then, then it's organizing them to, hey, are you going to come to the meeting in December? We'd love for you to give a 7-minute talk. Here's a basic structure. We can give basics, it's up to them to put the slides together, but I might have a template slideshow like, here, just go over the basics. You've got 7 minutes and then a few minutes for questions, because we want to get through a lot of these trials, and that usually goes really well. They might ask, hey, can you make that figure for me? Or sure. And you can pull all your methods, your objectives, take it from the report or from the protocols that we work from. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It's just something for you to have behind you, or to help you speak about your project, to tell your story of, here's what I was curious about, here's why, here's what I did, here's what I found, right? This is a basic 4 or 5 slides that we template that we give them, and they can get through that in about 7 minutes. And it generates a whole host of discussion and Q&A with the other farmers who are maybe in that breakout room or in that group to learn more about the process, or kind of think about, oh, and now next time we should do something like this to learn a little bit more about this issue. It's pretty neat to watch and be a part of. Okay. So I see a question in the chat, standardized ways of capturing economic data. We often ask for them to report their costs, right? So if it's fertilizer or seed or whatever, or the compost product that they're using or whatever, we often ask for them. Sometimes they'll share a receipt, or sometimes they'll be able to quote us. If it's practices like passes through the field, there are generally Iowa State publishes annual book values on that, like the cost to plant, the cost to spray, the cost to roll or till. We'll often just pull those because that's a common, those are the custom rates that they're called, that one might charge if they were to do that for a neighbor or whatnot. So that includes cost of equipment and time. So we will often use that in our economic factoring, but we would like from them, like, what was your cost of product, if that's what we're evaluating, because they're the ones who sourced that, and they usually have a receipt. They usually don't have they usually don't have well, it cost me this much to till or to plant. Like, I don't think many farmers kind of think about that, but I could be wrong. The book value is acceptable, and people usually say, yeah, that's fine, you can use that. And often for price received, either a farmer will report that. For grain, we can sometimes refer to the cash grain price that's being reported, or the 6-month price. We'll pick something like that from USDA or from Iowa State that publishes those data routinely. In terms of other things that have measured, soil health, crop quality. Yeah, we sometimes we do have to help people navigate whether those are relevant metrics to pay attention to, and also, the time commitment or the extent of sampling needed to be done. It's really easy to soil sample or tissue sample from small plots that are 6 feet by 12 feet. Like if I were a grad student or a university researcher, when you're talking about strips that are 30 feet wide and half a mile long, you can take 10 soil samples from that strip, but is it really representing that strip very well? I don't know. Would someone take 20 cores, 30 cores from that in order to get a representative sample? I don't know. Sometimes people are quite gung-ho and want to take tissue or soil samples, and so they'll take a few from each strip, and we might learn something from those. In my experience, we haven't been able to detect a lot of differences, even if we see differences in costs, yield, maybe even weed pressure. Detecting differences in like tissue samples or soil samples in large strips has been difficult to come by. Anymore, I'm a little less likely to want to do that. They can be expensive. The lab costs can be expensive. The time and labor to execute the sampling in like hot July or August is not fun. But there's a lot of interest, obviously, right, in measuring soil health or plant quality. So it's oftentimes having that kind of realistic conversation of, yeah, you can do it, and sometimes we have the funds to support those lab costs. Sometimes not. We don't just always, we have those funding support generally is to go to a kind of flat stipend or participation fee. When it's, hey, can you also help pay for the lab costs or the shipping costs? I don't always have, at least the way we're set up, a way to always say yes to that kind of thing. I do have to, my reality check is, will you be responsible for taking the samples and shipping them? So that I have to say, can I help compensate? It depends on the funding available for this project. If it's really kind of rigid, or if it's more fluid, what I can do for you. But I do start to have that conversation of, what are we going to learn from this, right? We have done quite a bit of soil health testing in these large strips and plots. And again, I don't see a good alignment of, okay, treatment A is performing better, but the soil sampling doesn't say that. Okay, maybe there is no difference in those soil metrics. Maybe we didn't take enough samples. Can we take enough samples? I know you can harvest this strip really well with the equipment or the labor that you have, because that's what you do. I like to rely on any more kind of what the things that farmers typically do as part of their normal routine. It's planting crops, planting seeds, tending to them, harvesting them, recording costs and returns. Those are the things that they're collecting, and we can get a lot of good information and tell a good story from that. We sometimes, right, we maybe trip over ourselves and say, oh, but I want to learn all these things too. Like, that'd be nice, but we might not be able to with this tool, with this design. It might not just be set up totally well to do that. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So I start to get a little more cautious about going beyond things that are a part of routine operations, and that would probably take a little more intensified labor than we can rely on, because the way we're set up is nobody from PFI is going out to help sample, collect measurements in the field. We're not a lab. We don't have that kind of infrastructure or that kind of personnel available to do that. Or we can't, go to 2 farms at once that are 6.5 hours away to do the same. I mean, it really has to be about them doing it. And that's really kind of, we've set up that way too, because it's your project, it's your trial. Like, we want you to learn to be the ones seeing and feeling and struggling with it. And we know that it can be a struggle, and it can be daunting and intimidating and a lot of work. We know that, and we're here to support you on that. So that's a little bit about that question, Doug.
These are usually 1-year trials. Is that right?
These are typically 1-year trials. Sometimes we can get commitments for multi-year. The reason why they're typically 1 year is that it's right. You might do something 1 year and say, oh, geez, you know what? I should have done it a little differently next year. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to stop standing in the way of that, because it's about the learning. It's about, geez, I don't want to have to do this again next year. I've already kind of learned or figured out, like, no, I need to do it like this next year, and I'm going to learn more. Let's do it. And I can't, I could try to write that into a grant proposal or say, like, we're going to, do it this way, maybe again the next time. We try not to corner people into doing the same thing over and over, because we want them to really tell us, how'd that go? Do you want to repeat this? What's next after learning from 1 year? What's the next evolution of your idea, of your project, or is there something else you want to train your attention on? So that's typically how it's gone. That's not to say that we don't want to try to, if some kind of natural multi-year thing comes about, we're all ears. But I might get farmers to commit to something July, but come 6 months from now, they might be like, nah, I kind of changed my mind on that because this, that, and the other, or I had my farming partner left and I can't do that now. Okay, well, we committed to this thing, and I can't get too upset that, stuff happens based on the way that we're set up. So typically 1 year studies is how we're set up.
Okay. I'm gonna just read a couple of the chat questions to speed things up, but Michelle wants to know if you do any kind of metrics on, like, how many other growers look at these and adopt practices because of them.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I have a good answer for that. All I have is that in terms of all the educational materials or resources we put out, research reports and field days are 1 and 2 in terms of their ranked of importance from a member survey of our 6,400 members. Whether they're then saying, I started using this variety of bell peppers because of that report, or maybe they just started, hey, I'm gonna at least try that bell pepper on my farm, or I'm gonna try that cover crop on my farm. We don't have a good inkling of, was it that research report that made you do it, or was it also that report, you went to this event, you went to this field day, you watched this webinar, you read this thing. I mean, it's a mishmash gumbo of all those things that are probably helping tip some people over, of all the resources or the network that we create. So I don't have a good answer for that, unfortunately, for those who are touched from outside the program that aren't necessarily participating, but they're consuming the material. I don't know, but it'd be awesome to know. And I don't know how well we'd be able to really get at that kind of thing, for them to tell us, yes, it was exactly that report that came out 2 years ago by those two. Like, I don't know.
Hard to measure. Do you do any collaboration with like Iowa State or other research facilities?
Absolutely. Since the beginning, Iowa State researchers have been involved. In fact, they were part of the kind of genesis of this to help teach about replicated randomized design. And sometimes they were extra parts of a dissertation or a thesis, right? Maybe a grad student was connected with some farmers, and they've got a complicated trial on a research station, but then farmers did components of that, right? Maybe there was 5 or 6 treatments on the station. Farmers might just do 2 of them on their farms, and that adds a little bit of information. It connects farmers and young career researchers, which is a good thing. Yeah, there's always been collaboration with Iowa State. It's not like half our work is with them, but we do find opportunities Maybe to that question that Doug asked, we do sometimes find opportunities for grad students or researchers to sample plant tissue or soil, or do crop disease ratings on farms. That's where we can bring some, as I call it, extra firepower of, hey, this pathologist is going to come out and dig out some plants and look for root disease in your trial. So how does that sound? And they're like, heck yeah, bring her out. Like, that sounds great. I'd love to learn about, or I'd love to help learn about that. Or I've seen her give extension talks. I think they're great. And I love that they're wanting to work with PFI and work with me. And likewise, the researchers I love working with farmers. I get to talk to them, learn all kinds of ideas or what kind of challenges they're facing that I could help develop research in my lab to better serve them. I mean, that kind of interchange is really awesome to be a part of it as well. So we do look for those opportunities from time to time when it's the right fit, right? When the researcher is shown, hey, they're into PFI, they've showed up at our events, maybe they presented at some of our events. We can tell that our growers meld well with them, respect them, want to work with them. That sounds like hey, let's make this happen. Let's make a match. We can learn more from this synergy. We can expose young career scientists to farmers. We can expose farmers to scientists, which is a good thing too, so that they kind of build that literacy or that trust with the people that are generating the research. You know, everybody sees, oh, everybody's just a real person. They're not just names on a page. I've read this. I've seen interviews with this person. I've seen them speak. And now I get to talk to them one-on-one, you know, at the edge of my cornfield. That's pretty cool. So yeah, we frequently work with our friends and partners at Iowa State, where appropriate.
Anyone else have a question? I will be happy to ask more.
Keep them coming.
Sorry, I've got someone mowing right outside my window. I'm curious if you do any like background research when somebody brings up an idea, you know, like, has this already been researched?
Yeah, that's part of our role too, is to kind of help navigate the existing literature or our familiarity with some of the practices. Obviously, so my background is in crop science from Iowa State. I work with a lot of veggie growers, so I didn't come from a horticulture background. I mean, they're all, to me, it's all plants, and then no disrespect, but I didn't study tomatoes or bell peppers or lettuce. And so I do have to kind of learn, but I know how to learn about things, I guess, and that's part of our role is, you know, learn about or ask them questions. Why does lettuce behave this way? Or why do you think that? And, you know, we can look up any literature or past research that practical farmers have done that would go into kind of our background or introductions of our research reports to show, hey, you know, 5 years ago, farmers did stuff on this through PFI, and now a new set of farmers wanted to look at a new twist on that. But we might cite those previous reports, or we might say, hey, you know, recent research from the University of Minnesota shows this. Farmers wanted to see if that was true on their farms too, right? Kind of ground truth. Oh, that's cool. Neat stuff happening on small plots at the university. What does that mean for me? So we'll make that kind of connection of, you know, does it translate to this farm and the way that they practice on their farm? Yes or no is kind of will be the take home there. Yeah, so ground truthing is kind of how we explain that.
To what extent are these trials like, does PFI have a sort of mission for what trials they will and won't do? Is it just like, hey, any questions, fair game? Or do you guys have, you know, like, well, this is really our, you know, these are the things that are important to us and we're moving farming, you know, in the right direction?
Yeah, we try to accommodate as many of them and as many of the issues or topics as we can. That being said, we have kind of greater umbrella priority areas of, right, and these are kind of general. Soil health, okay, that can be a lot of things. Continuous living cover, okay, so that's cover crops, grazing, diversified rotations. We can fit things into those. but sometimes things come around that are totally outside of those, and we have to evaluate, well, where's our rigid funding and our fluid funding. And oh, this is a new person, they've never participated before, we want to maybe highlight, like, let's deepen the bench, let's get people involved. Their idea might not necessarily be this, but it's a pretty good idea that I think they can, and I think it's doable. They seem really enthusiastic and on board. I've had a conversation with them, I've had a reality check, I've tried to scare them away, they didn't get scared away. All right, I'm going to try to make this happen. I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to slot them into kind of a more fluid spot, because I want more people to participate. Once you get involved, it becomes a treadmill. Questions become, people just become more involved. Right, that's part of our goal, is they better have a good experience, because we want them to stay involved and join this network and help us spread the word about PFI, how to learn things, what we learned. So yeah, sometimes it's a careful dance of, we have kind of major priority areas. Season extension for vegetable is kind of one of them. That's rather, that can be quite a large field, but obviously there's still some bounds there, where, like, is this season extension or isn't it? So yeah, it's kind of a careful dance there. And again, it's all like listening. Those priority areas come from listening to them, of where then we're seeking funding, and what we're telling those funders, here's the kind of stuff we're going to do. It's going to be soil health related. It's going to be season extension related. It's going to be continuous living cover related. I can't give you specifics or details of that right now, because they are going to organically or naturally come up with the ideas, but we know that is a good model, that's a good practice, and good learning and outcomes come from that. So that's a big part of ours, is arguing that to our funders, that we don't always have specifics of what this trial is going to be or what we're going to investigate. It's probably going to be in this general sphere, but we're pretty confident that there's going to be good learning coming out of it, and good networking and confidence building and skill building, and outreach associated with it, right? So that's kind of how we build a case to funders.
I'll keep going if.
Yeah, man.
Some numbers questions, like, what are farmers getting? You talked about, it sounds like maybe a flat fee or whatever. And then I'm also wondering how big your team is and how many trials, like an individual.
Yeah. The compensation is a flat fee. We just bumped that up to $1,000 per trial. It had been at $550 per trial for as long as I'd been here. We started getting some feedback that, hey, it'd be really nice if that would go up. And so we just started putting into grant, hey, you know what, this is how much it costs for a trial now. This is what we're doing. And so we haven't gotten any pushback on that. And I can't wait to issue checks for $1,000 this year, because they didn't know that they were getting that. In their agreements, it all said $550, but a couple of weeks ago, I was able to top all those off based on our funding. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Of course, they're probably going to be a lot of confused, like, why did I get all this money? But that's okay. Yeah, so, and that helps us with budgeting, right? We just call it a flat fee rather than say, well, this one might get this much and there might be this much expense with it. Again, I don't know what the project is going to be until like next March. And, but we're applying for funding continuously through the year, depending on the different funders' calendars and cadences. Right now, then your second question was how big of a team. The research team is currently 2 scientists, myself and another, who handle all the trials. And I believe there are 89 trials going on this year with 61 participants. So that's a lot of that's what we do. That's our main responsibility, is working with those growers, those projects, running the program. Obviously, we go to other events that PFI holds to help staff them, or our annual conference is an all hands on deck kind of thing. but we're not really playing a part in planning those things or writing articles for the magazine. We have other teammates that do those kinds of things anymore. And obviously there's a lot of back and forth, like, hey, what could my next magazine article be about? Hey, you could try featuring these people, or they're telling us that, hey, this is an issue that seems to be bubbling up a lot from the people I'm talking to, and then that might be something that we might then start talking to those farmers and worth investigating with the trial or seeking funding for. But yeah, it's right now it's a two-headed beast with many heads across the state and upper Midwest of curious and enthusiastic doers or cooperators. And for the most part, they're engaged, right? It's not a lot of hair pulling and cat herding, because it's their projects. They want to do it. Now, some of them can be easier to work with than others, and that's just learning about personalities and working with people. Or also trusting that I might not be hearing from them, but I know they're solid because I've been working with them. I know they're doing it. They're just busy, or they're going to get it to me all at the end of the month because that's the way they roll. Others are really good with email. Others are really good with text. It's people, that's what that's part of the process that probably, that was a lot of learning for me on the job and all of us at Practical Farmers learned to really learn more about the people we work with, the people we serve, and pay attention to that so that we can show up for them, so that we can really understand what they need. And then it's really rewarding, but it's the work. That's what you got to do. It's the job.
Well, we're kind of at 1 o'clock, but if you're willing to take another question.
I'm willing. This has
Okay.
been great.
I know some of you probably have to jump off and get back in the heat, and a couple people already have, but yeah, if there's some more questions, he says, keep them coming.
I have a follow-up quick.
Okay, sure. Go ahead, Doug.
Just, so the question about economics, we're thinking about this in terms of, some new big visionary, like large scale engagement activities with farmers to do on-farm research with them. But the economic data collection and analysis is a sticking point. You guys, it sounds like, then do data analysis, like if they'll capture in various creative ways the basic information that you need. They don't need to learn how to do their own economic analysis. They don't do their own graphs and stats necessarily.
Nope.
Right. So you guys, that's what the research team from PFI brings to the table.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we teach the principles of randomization and replication, why that's important. But then, yeah, we're running the analyses. We're helping to draw up a table or a figure, and we write the report, and then they get to comment on it or add their things to it. That's one of our major lifts is you do the work and get us the data, and we know how you all did that, and because we had conversations with you, so that's not lost, right? It's important to know that, and to also be clear that the people those who were taking the measurements or the observations were the farmers, not just PFI took Anna went out on, September 3rd and made these counts. And she also remarked that, wow, geez, it seemed like this treatment had a whole lot more fruit than this one, right? I mean, we'll put those kinds of, we'll humanize it. But then, yeah, we're drawing up the graphs and doing the analysis and kind of talking to them about, here's what we're seeing from the results you gave us.
You guys have templates and things that you got developed over the years that help you organize that stuff, that you might be willing to share with us?
I mean, it's basically just like spreadsheets or graphs.
Well, no, I'm just thinking like Anna went out and checked things and wrote some stuff down. Like, do you provide Anna with, here's a calendar?
Oh,
jot
yeah.
down what you did, when you did it, and what you saw, or is it just
scraps
of paper that they may or may not be writing down?
it's all of the above, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yes, we do have, I can share these kind of shared online, like either through Google Sheets or shared Excel sheets of here's the data form, or here's the like the field activities form. Mark down the dates you did these things and any observations, right? So
Yeah.
they'll enter that, and I'll get pinged, or my teammate will get pinged that, oh, so-and-so made an entry. And if it's clear to us, we'll just say, okay, great, that's clear. If it's not clear, then I might call or write them and say, hey, I see you updated this. I'm not sure what that means. Can you help me understand what that means?
Mhm.
I like to do that as is, because, okay, I know that they were just thinking about this. Now's a good time to follow up about it. So I have those sheets. I could share a template or two. I will say I'll take a texted photograph of a piece of notebook paper that has everything I need on it any day, though.
Yep.
Like forcing them to, like, oh, here, use Google Sheets, and they don't use it, but they send me a photograph of a notebook page that has everything. I'll take it every day.
Okay.
Now, they need to know what I want, or what we want, right? Planting date, cultivation date, harvest date, fertilization date, all that stuff. I need to get to them, like, here are the things I need to know from you, or would like to know from you, in order to, tell this story. So that when others read this, they see, yeah, they do all the things that I would do to raise this crop at the right time, right? They're planting in April or May. They treated weeds, they treated pests, or whatnot. They weren't planting corn in July. Why is this so weird, right? Like, all those things that seem like, ugh, why do I got to do this? But no, we're trying to paint a picture of what you did. And others are going to read this and say, this is BS, or this is a farmer like me.
Mhm.
But yeah, I can share. Who should I share that with? Cassie, should I share with you a template?
That'll work. You've got my email.
Yeah.
But so you would work out the specifics on that initial meeting when you set up the design, probably.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, there's I don't really often, I work from maybe a kind of a rough template, but I try to then tailor that to that project, right? That, if it's an organic farmer, I'm not going to say, when did you spray herbicide? It's going to be, when did you cultivate, right? So it's not going to say, when did you apply anhydrous, right? It's going to say, when did manure go down, or compost, right? We try to make it so that, we're really working with them on a personal one-to-one level, and not just giving them this blank sheet to tell us about their project. It has to say, oh, obviously they understand that I'm growing organic peppers. I'm, or I'm raising no-till soybeans with a cover crop. So we tailor, that a lot of that is then, okay, I know the ins and outs of this trial. Now I need to develop a worksheet for them. And that just takes time. I mean, that's the work. But that's us showing up, showing that we value this. Here's everything we need based on what you're going to do for your project, for your trial. We are paying attention to you. And here's what it's going to take to make this happen. So there's no just like blank template. It's sometimes I'll work from a pepper trial for a tomato trial, but then, just change some of the words.
That's a good thing, though. I mean,
yeah, right. No, it is, because then it keeps you dialed in. You're not just on autopilot generating a bunch of worksheets.
Mhm. One last question from anyone?
I guess what's the demographic of people on the call? Are it mostly farmers? I see obviously some maybe researchers too. I didn't know. I guess I didn't know what I was walking into here.
That's right.
That's fine. It's fine.
We're generally a little heavy on the researchers for these meetings, but
okay.
Getting more farmers, and we're happy to see them. So
okay.
Yeah.
It varies month to month depending on the topic, and
It does, yeah.
Okay.
it's been community building or network building, trying to get a sense of who's interested in on-farm research and
Yeah.
how we can better build infrastructure to help support it. So
Yeah. Well,
PFI's always been a role model out there. That's great that he's able to make time for us.
No, of course. And I will say, like, PFI was entirely farmer-led and generated from the start.
Right.
Including, and the research program was one of the original things. It was research and field days. And it was, obviously, there was assistance from people like me or at the university, but it was the farmers that said, we want to do this, and here's what if we wanted to do this, what would it take? And then it would say, well, do some strip trials on this, and then, host people to your farms and make it available, make it free to attend. And then that's what they did for 30 some years. And they're still doing it. So yeah, I will just, like, from what my experience and from what I know of the history is, like, the desire, the genesis from the farmers, from the people themselves, has to be there. And that's really valuable and important.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And OEFA's got a great, and maybe I'm conflating OEFA in this group, and I'm sorry if I've been doing that.
Joint effort.
Okay. Right. That's a robust farmer network, and a respected one, that has been around since the late 70s, so longer than PFI, 10 or 11 years more than PFI, so, or maybe 6 years. So that network's there. I think, based on what I've learned and understand, and I'm sure there's tons of curiosity and enthusiasm in that as well, and diversity and differing opinions, and that's okay too.
Well, we'll go ahead and close this off. Oh, Lincoln, you got one more question?
I got a quick one.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody here. This is my first time at one of these meetings. Thank you so much for organizing, and thank you, Stefan, for speaking. This is really great.
Right.
I am a farmer, but a friend and I recently started a nonprofit, and we're running 20 trials this season in the Northeast to look at perennial growing cash crops and perennial clover, everything from small grains to vegetables. Okay. And I'm curious if you're willing to share your email, if you'd be willing to meet with me at some point. The trials you're describing are very, very similar. And I love, it's just so rare that it's farmer led. And like when you're talking about, it's like person to person. And it just feels right on so many levels to be like, yeah, I don't have a form that is just going, getting blasted out. It's about like this individual and their farm and the relationship you build with that person.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Well, there's my email. There's an L missing in that. But you can also find, jeez, who types out their emails anymore anyway, right? That's our website. And obviously my email would have an L between the A and the F. But you can find also my contact on our major website, as well as the contact of all my teammates. And Cassie is free to share my contact info with the group here. That's totally fine. It's online. It's publicly available.
There's no escaping it.
I can't stop you anyway. I'm happy to share and touch base whenever or as I can. That's awesome to hear, Lincoln, about the work you're doing with growers. That's in Northeast Ohio.
We're mostly in Mass, but also Connecticut, New York.
Oh, Northeast US. Okay, cool.
US. There's one in Minnesota. There's one in Iowa.
Nice.
But we're mostly East. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I will post this online and be on our YouTube channel if anyone wants to review it, and I'll share that out. And I hope to see some of you back next month.